Hello everyone, welcome to Code with Femi. I hope you guys are well. It's amazing to be here. I'm now a father of three wonderful kids. The little one came on Monday, and I'm really grateful for those that congratulated me. It is amazing. In this actual video, we're going to be looking at the final episode of this crash course, which is going to be unit testing. So let's test. What is unit testing? Unit testing is actually a type of software testing where your software components and the units are actually tested. You need to ensure that everything that you've actually implemented is working as expected. And this is where you need to make use of, unit tests. And in MVC, we actually have a specific, way we ensure that we test, the controllers, test for the view, and test for the data. And that is what I'm going to be showing you in this video. I know in the last video I actually mentioned something about, maybe trying to come up with repository, unit of work, and all of that, but I'll rather leave that for another session. This shouldn't form into this session because we're focusing more on MVC, and I don't really want to go down another route. I want us to stick to MVC and make sure we cover the core aspect of MVC. So in terms of this unit test, it's just going to be focusing on the way you should test your MVC application. Okay, so bear with me. I'm just going to switch my screen so you can see the documentation I have right in front of me. You can see here that there is actually already documentation which I am going to also, like, in a way, implement for you guys to see how you should be writing your unit test when you're dealing with MVC applications. Okay, and one thing I just want to point out here is that this is actually a guide. There are other scenarios that you would definitely test for, because in my own case, like, there are cases where you need to test for instance, negative scenarios, and you have to test for a positive scenarios. So you need to be able to tell, okay, when there's a problem, or when there's an exception, how should your code actually act. And then in terms of positive, what should happen in the case of a positive scenario. So it all depends on how you've developed your system and what you want to test for. But what I'm going to show you guys is just a guide as to be able to know how to really implement unit testing for your MVC application. So let's actually jump straight into the code. Inside of the code, you would see from the past video, we actually did some authorization and all of that, but I'm going to focus more on the actual controller actions. And as I would like to mention that this is actually a unit by itself, and when you are testing for this unit, you must ensure that you're testing it in isolation. You shouldn't actually, now, for some reason, when you're testing this, for some reason it's also testing some component within your core. And that is where we come up with things like being able to mock out your dependencies. And I'm going to show you that in this actual video, because remember, we rely on abstraction to connect to our core from our interface. Our interface actually, like, connects to our core through this abstraction. Okay, so we have this iData service, and I'm going to show you guys how we're going to test if, like, a simple view component, and as well as just test a controller. Okay, so we're going to just come up with, so whatever unit test I'm going to come up with is just going to be within this interface layer, not this domain layer or the infrastructure. We're gonna deal with this once, maybe later. We won't want to do like a clean architecture, like go through a series of that. But now let's just focus on this section. So To actually implement your unit test, the first thing you want to do is you want to create a new project, a unit test project, right? So you right click on the, so if you don't have a solutions folder, it's fine. You can right click on the actual solution itself, but I have a solutions folder here. I'm just going to right click on it because that's where I want to add the unit test, and then I'm going to say new project. Under the new project, you should actually have an option to be able to select test. You can see right there, there's test. And also the test, as there are different types of tests. You can do Microsoft test if you want to, but I prefer the end unit test. That is what I use in most of my project, and I would like to select that. So selecting that, and then I will rather just make sure that it conforms to the same name I've given my project, like this. So this is actually the convention I follow. I just say web application, maybe 3 dots, then I say tests. So this is just to ensure that I know what test project is is used for a particular project. So this is just a way to know, okay, if I see that, I know, okay, it's actually like referring to the code within this actual project. Because as you go along as well, you can actually add another one here to call it web application 3.core.tests, okay, like that. And then you have one again for infrastructure, same story. But now, like I said, we're just going to focus more on this actual section, right? So now you can see right there, I'm just going to show you guys. It has basic ones that that comes default, which is just this unit test 1. And what I do normally is I actually just take this out and create like some sort of like a structure in here just to know where the tests are. And also I want to just clarify something in terms of unit testing. This is actually your job as a software engineer or a software developer. It is not the job of a QA to write unit tests. So please bear in mind, you need to make sure that when you write your code, ensure that it is properly tested by you writing the unit test. And even some cases you need to write like integration test, you need to write functional test. Like you need to be able to ensure that you do that. You can't expect the QA to do that. That is not the job of a QA, because some QA are not really, they don't understand C#, they don't understand backend language. Because I've actually seen in cases where some developers are forcing the QA to write the actual test. But that is not right. The actual developers or the software engineer must write the actual test. So in there, we'll just actually expand this. Let's right click on that, which is actually that project, and then we add a folder which is just conforming to the structure we have here. So I'm going to call it controllers there. So under controllers, I'm just going to pick one. I don't want to like test everything. I'm just going to pick one for this, and then you can do more stuff as you like. You can do this yourself. I'm just going to show you how to do it, the guide. So you can see right there that we have the about controller. So in the about controller, the reason why I'm going to use that is because it has the 3 things I would like to test, which is the first one is ensuring that it's returning a view, and the other one is I want to ensure that it's returning a model, the right model to me, and the final one is to ensure that it's actually returning back the actual type I'm expecting, which is of this type, action result. Okay, so those are the 3 things we're going to test for a actual MVC application. So there we have the controller, and then I'm just going to put in a new class here. So the new class I'm going to put in here is going to be the class for testing. So I'm going to call this about controller, and remember it has to just in a way conform to the name of that controller there, and then I can just say tests. So I'm saying that I'm testing all the units within this about controller inside of this actual class file. I'm going to click on add. So in there now, I now know. So anyone that actually sees this structure now can now say, okay, about controller test is actually, it means I'm testing all the units within this about controller. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So there, just make sure that naming you keep it going like that. Okay. And then another thing I would like to mention is that For this test to be able to test your actual code within this project, you have to put a reference here. So you right click on dependencies, add project reference, and then you must add reference to the actual project where your implementation is, what you want to test. Then you can click on OK, because now then you have it right there, which is gonna be easy when I start implementing it. So in terms of your actual test, this is what this is just the basic class. But now for you to now start setting up your class, you need to ensure that you have, the first thing you want to have is to have a setup attribute on this method, which is going to be a void method, which we're going to call setup, and I'm going to explain this. So this actual method that you see right here is the first method that gets called. Okay, sorry, by the way, you can see that the IntelliSense actually helped me there. Just make sure that the actual U is a capital letter, because now you might be confused as to what, like, is that small letter, or so it's actually a U, a capital letter U. So just bear that in mind. So but this like as I was saying, this actual method is the first method that gets called to be able to ensure that every of the let's say data that you've prepped, all the things you've mocked and stocked, is actually like initialized within this. So see this like the constructor. It's like it's actually a constructor for your test class. So you have to put the attribute there for the actual test component mechanism to know, okay, this is actually the method for initializing all the necessary things that you need for your tests. And then now you have the actual method itself, which is going to be test. So you put an attribute test on it. Public, same story. This can be void. This can be asynchronous task. Depends on whatever it is that you're actually trying to test. In my own case, this is actually just a synchronous method, so I will actually just make it void. And then what I want to test for is to actually say that can check for view so result. So this is just for me it's just for me to say that this actual this actual index can actually return back a view to me, because there's cases where you want to do like a redirect, because you can say, for instance, you might choose not to actually return a view. You can redirect to another action by using like this, redirect to action. You can see there. So you can actually do that if you want to put in the name of the action, and then as well as the controller, and as well as some objects that you can see there. So this actual redirect to action, as it's overloaded, it's an overloaded method. It has different types that you can really use based on what scenario you're dealing with, because if you see right there, you can see all the necessary ones: actions with root values, actions with controller name, you see actions with controller with root values. So it depends on whatever you're trying to achieve based on your actual code. But I'm just saying, in my scenario, this is what I'm testing for. I'm testing for it that it can actually return back a view. Okay, so let's just bear that in mind. So right here we have the actual controller that I'll put right on top of here. I'm just going to make it private, and then I'm going to call this let's just call this about controller like that, and then we just say about controller. And the reason why we're calling this about controller is because, remember, we're actually testing for about controller. That's the class we're testing for. That's the actual place where the unit we're testing for is. Okay, and see right there that we have the actual unit there, which is that one, index. That's the only action it's got, the only unit that is got in there. But right there, we can now actually say that we want to do about controller is equals to new. Like I said, this is where you do your initialization. Okay, so this is actually one scenario where we've actually just set up a private field that is local to this class, and then we actually just initializing it here into a new constructor of that actual about controller, because in this about controller it doesn't really have a constructor with parameters. It only has a parameterless constructor, and that's why I can easily just instantiate it this way. Okay, so right there are three things you have to bear in mind when you're writing your test. The first thing is to actually be able to arrange, and the next thing is to act, and the last final thing you will be doing is to assert, and I'm going to explain that now. So arranges you actually like making sure that you set up all the necessary data or all the necessary things, dependencies, like the setting up of your dependency mocks and all of that. And then the next step is to actually now do the test. It's like you acting to actually test the actual code that you've written. And then assert is to actually confirm that it is what you've said it is. Like you whatever come out of this result, you are now saying that this is what you're expecting. Then you compare what you're expecting to the actual initial results that you get. So the act will provide the initial results. So right here you have something like the result. So you have something like this, that is result. And the reason why we're not going to have arrange is because there's not really data that we need to prep to really do this test. So but I would show you where you have to do arrange. We'll do that when we start testing the view component, but let's just test this. So about is controller, then you say index. So this is the actual test. Now we're actually calling this actual index, right? And then the next thing you want to now do is you want to now assert to say that result. Okay, so we have a result, right? We can actually just read actually we can actually just say assert, okay, dot is type is we can actually say is true. Sorry, we can actually say is true, and then we can actually say result dot get type, okay, equals type of view result. And I'll show you now why I'm actually saying this. Okay, let's just resolve that first. Okay, jumpy. Okay, let's see. So what we have here, what we've actually said is that this actual type that we got from this actual result is of this type, right? That is what we are actually testing for. Okay, and you now might be wondering, how do I know this? Okay, let's go back to the actual controller. Remember that for the view, you can see right there when I hover on the view, can you see telling me that it's going to return back a type of view result? Let's see if we can. Okay, this doesn't really, okay, it shows you that, you can see, and you see there, this is the type is actually returning back when you actually call that method. That's the return type, and that is what I'm also expecting in my test, that whenever I call this index, it must give me back this type. So that actually protects whatever implementation I've written here, because somebody else can come here and actually change this to something else, then the test is gonna fail. And we're gonna try that now and see, and we're gonna see what I mean. Okay, let's save this, right? So let's clean that up. And now to run your test, you can actually just right click on this actual class and actually just say run test. But because we want to debug this, you can actually put a breakpoint there, and then we can actually just say debug test. So that's actually what we need to do. And but before we go on, there's gonna be some discovery happening here. But before it happens quickly, I just want to make sure that I put a breakpoint here, because I want you to see the flow of things as well, right? I'm gonna stick this to the left there. That okay. Let's see. So this is actually still building up, I want to believe. But you can see right there now that we have some information here to tell us, okay, we have a test, and within the test, this is actually the one that we're actually checking for now, right? You can see that it's still building up right there. It's still trying to compile and all of that, but the actual test would actually run now once it's actually like compiled properly and it's it's ready. But you would see that the first place that would get hit is this actual section, and this is because this is like the first place it actually does all the necessary initialization before it actually does what it needs to do. There are also cases where within this actual setup you want to like do your arrange. There are cases where you have to do your arranges within your setup. You don't necessarily have to do it within your method, and the reason why you want to do that is because maybe the actual data or that you're arranging can be reused for multiple scenarios. So that's where you might want to like put it in there. But as you can see, the breakpoint is actually hit, and it's actually on the actual setup method. You can see there that now I'm initializing an about controller that is initialized, and then we move on to the next, which is like we can act now, because we don't really need to prep for any dependency like mocking anything or stopping anything. So we don't have to do that. So we can actually just call that method, and I'm going to step into it so you can see right there. You can see that it's actually calling that method, that index action within the about controller. It's doing the normal getting of the module, and it's passing back into the view, and it's going to return back. And if you check right there, you will see that this is actually going to tell me that it's actually happy now. So let's check our test. You can see right there, it's telling me now that I'm happy. This is actually what I'm expecting. So now that code has been tested. Now I know it's fully working. So let's say for instance some other person, some other engineer just comes in here, or developer comes in here and say, dude, I'm just going to change this to a partial view because that's what I want to return now. Like I just want to change this. And this is where the unit test really helps you, because now when you run your test, because now they've changed the code, but your test is still going to tell you what is going on. So when I run this code now, I'm not going to really debug it. I'm just going to run the test so that we can see the failure at the bottom here. Then you will now see now that it's going to just tell you that like this is not actually what I'm expecting. It has to fail, because now we've actually gone to change the code, even though the test is actually saying this is what I'm expecting. This is what I'm expecting from this actual action. So as you can see right there, you can see that the actual stuff is failed. You can see they say that expected true but was false. You can see right there, which is actually something that helps to be able to tell that okay, there's something wrong with you can see it's red now, it's not happening anymore. And this is because this is no longer true anymore, because now this type that we're getting from this result is not the same type as view result anymore. But that is how you actually be able to protect your code, to be able to be sure that your code is working as expected and things are actually just in place. If I run this now, you will see that everything is actually good in a pack again. So as you can see, it's actually green again, and this is because the type is already we've updated the code. Everything is actually fine again. So this is actually just you testing for this scenario, which is can check for view result, which means that we're actually expecting the view result from that test. Let's copy this and let's do the next one, which will be that we can check for view results data. So this one will actually check for the data coming back from the actual view result. Okay, and same story, we don't need to arrange for anything here. What we just want to do is we just want to make sure that before we actually assert, we get the actual type out, the data out itself. So we can actually say model is equals to so we can actually just do as view result, because that's what we're expecting, and then we can actually just say result dot model. You can see right there, we can actually just say add admin view model. I want to believe that is what we actually like expecting back. That's what we're expecting back, so we can actually just cast it. You might be wondering, what is this as I'm actually writing everywhere? This is actually you converting a specific type to another type, because this index returns I action result, and now we're actually converting that action result to another type, which is view result. And then from that view result, there is actually a model in there that we want to get, which is the actual about view model. And you can see for the view result model, it's an object. The type there is an object, so I'm actually casting it to another type, which is about view model. So but as we go along, you will understand, how to use casting, boxing and unboxing and all of that. But you can see right there, I'm just converting it from one type to the other. So from model is object, is of type object. You can see right there, object. But what I need is actually this type so that I can actually do some assertion here. So inside of the view model, remember we have all of this. I'm just going to copy this, right? Let's copy that. Let's go back to our test. And then in here, we're just going to say, so now we actually are starting to say dot equal, right? So this is where I'm saying they are equal. So what I'm expecting is actually this, and the actual result is actually going to be that. Okay, whatever come out of that must be equal to that. Okay, let's copy the same and let's do the other one as well, because there are two types there, right? Okay, and then I can actually do the same thing here. Just say description. I see right there. So we have the actual information now, where we are checking for the data. Now we're checking for the view result data. Okay, so now we're just going to test this as well. You can see right there that is actually popping up already. I'm just going to let's debug this. Let's just debug this one. Let's go right there and actually just click on debug, and then you will see what is going to happen. Okay, it's eating the setup method. Let's continue, and then right there we have the actual new the new test that we've written. Let's just step through it and see. It's actually casted to view result type. Even the initial one was action result, but now it's view result, and then from view result we're actually like casting it to that model. You can see right there that our data is coming back. So all of these assertions are actually going to pass now. So that means that this test is going to be green. You can see right there it's green. It's telling us everything passed. You can even see, you can also say show test results, and that should actually show you like all the information, but it shows you everything. So right there we have this, right? So now let's say for instance someone goes into the actual model and actually change this to YouTubers. I'm just gonna use that as an example, right? If I try to run this now, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to fail. And the reason why it's going to fail is because now we've actually gone to modify the actual code, and the test already tells us this is what I'm actually expecting. So this would assert, this would be fine. I'm gonna put let's just actually, like, instead of even like running it, let's debug it so you can actually see this in action. I'm just gonna right click there and say debug, and then this will actually just debug this, so you can actually see what how it does the check and all of that. And we can also like view and the watch what is the difference between the what we're expecting and what was actually supplied to us. Okay, so we say continue, then right there move on. Then if you check here, you can see this one is still fine. Code with Femi is equals to code with Femi, which is fine. But this one, it's now saying I love coding on YouTubers, but this is still saying I love coding on YouTube. What is going to happen there? It's going to break. You can see right there, gives you that error. You can see, tells you expected I love coding on YouTube, but was I love coding on YouTuber. So you can see right there that this is actually working, and this is how you can actually be able to start ensure that your code is quality. You can pick up issues in your code as quick as possible, because let's say for instance you have a lot of code everywhere. It's your unit test that is really going to help you. This is very crucial to developing quality software. You need to ensure you implement unit tests in your code. So the next one we would like to cover is to actually ensure that we test for the view components, right? And what we want to do right here is we want to right click there, and we want to just create a view component folder, and then we're just going to make sure that we have, because we want to test for this unit, this actual unit we created. Let's just let's just say rename, because I just want to copy that name out. I'm going to right click on view components in my test project and say new class, Same story. I'm just gonna add that there. So remember, always put the the suffix tests at the end, so that you can actually just let anyone know that this is the actual test class for the implementation. Okay, so we have that. Now we have the actual test, and in the same story, I'm gonna actually create to set up capital letter U, don't forget that. Then we have public void setup. Okay, let's actually resolve that. We need to resolve that using NUnit. Okay, NUnit, and then we actually have to set up. So the one I really want to cover, because we've already covered the the different scenarios, which is now return type, checking for return types. You can actually check that easily, because now you can see that this is actually returning a type of view component. You can go in there to actually see what type and check for it. See the view component results. But I'm not gonna do that check. That's not the test I want to do now. The check I want to do really now is around you being able to understand the reason why there's value in dependency injection, and as well as being able to ensure that you understand the whole concept of loosely coupled. So right there we have that interface that we will definitely mock out in our actual test and also stub, and then we would actually just ensure that when this actually runs, you're not actually calling another external unit, or you're not calling another unit somewhere else. You're actually just testing this in isolation as it is. Okay, so what I'm just going to do now is I'm going to just go inside of this. Another thing that you can also do is you can actually just grab that guy, just split the screen, so okay, this is what I'm testing for and all of that. I do this a lot, especially if you don't have two screens, because there are cases where you don't really have two screens. You can actually do this. You can break your screens like this as well within Visual Studio. It makes it easy for you, and it makes it also productive. And right there we can actually just copy from this method. Any of this method should be fine. I think the one I would like to get is the one with the data, because we're gonna be doing checks on the data, right? And right in there we're gonna be putting that in there. Okay, let's just push this down a little bit. And remember, this is not we're not testing AboutController, we are testing this actual controller, so just bear that in mind. Not really controller, sorry, the actual view component. We're testing this view component. So what we can now do is we can actually just say private view component, and actually just say blog list view component. Okay, that's the actual stuff we're testing, and this is what we're going to actually now play with something. So in terms of this actual view component, you will see that it actually has a constructor. I hope you guys can see that we're actually injecting this iData service, but in actual fact we don't want to call the real implementation of this iData service, because this is actually just we testing for this unit. We're not testing any other thing outside of this unit, and this is why it's called unit testing. You're just testing a unit, you're not testing anything. It has to be tested in isolation. So how do you really achieve that without calling the real implementation? This is where you have to implement something that to mock it out. So like you have to fake this thing out to be able to make sure that you set it up the way you want it to, you're expecting it to work, and then you pass it into this unit, and you can still test the logic within this unit. I hope that actually makes sense. So one of the libraries that I use personally is I use mock. So mock is one of the ones I use for for testing. I know some guys use fake it easy. There's a lot of different libraries out there, but whatever floats your boat. You don't really need to say that you have to go with what I'm currently using. Whatever you want to use, it's fine, but just make sure that you're installing whatever library you want to use for mocking and stubbing. But this is what I use, mock, because for me it's much easier, it's much simple and straight to the point. And so I'm going to install that inside of my test project. I'm installing that mock library into my project now, so that I can actually just use it to actually like fake out or stub out the actual this actual dependency that we're injecting into this actual view component. Okay, so right there we have we have that. So next thing you want to do is you want to now say, because now we have the mock installed, we can now say mock, and then we say iData service. Okay, let's check what we have in here. Why is it not? I'm just trying to see what is going on. Okay, let's resolve it. I just took its own precious time, but it's resolved that now, and then we have that. So now I can now say data service mock. So this is the actual mock now, and what I can now do is I can actually just instantiate this too. But before I do that, this is where you can now start arranging some data for your actual component to work. So in here you can actually just initialize that to say new, you know, this is a new mock service. This is what you've mocked out. Mock means that you're faking it. So this is actually now what we're faking it to actually pass it as a fake into this place. Okay, and then now the next thing you want to do is you just want to set up some information. Remember, or you don't necessarily have to set up the information, the actual data in there. What you can now do is you can actually just pass it straight into the actual component. So which would be this one, new component, and then in there I can just pass this in like this to say dot object. So that's all you need to do. You can see right there. So we've actually, like, you know, pass a fake instance of iData service into blog list view component to ensure that this actual unit is tested in isolation. Where are you? Yeah, this one at the bottom here, this invoke async. Okay, so now what we can now do is we can actually just say check view component data. And also, you don't have to really, you can test for all the, you can assert for everything down here if you want to. You don't have to do different tests for, you know, for data and for return type. You can actually assert for everything on one go. But it's just good to keep it like clean and small so that even any developer that wants to read this can easily read what is going on. So we have that. So this is where we're actually going to do some arrangements. So we're going to arrange here. Okay, we have to arrange, and the first thing we want to arrange is we want to set up this mock to ensure that it actually can return back a fake blog list that can be used for, you know, to ensure for this actual component, so that they can actually just work, the logic can work here, this actual for each and everything can work as we've expected. So this is where we actually now have to stop. I'm just going to say setup. Okay, so setup, we can actually call this service. Okay, service dot, so what we're now saying is when this actual guy is called, right? And the good thing is there are cases where it might have parameters coming in, and this is where you can actually, in mock, you can actually use something like it dot any is any, then you can pass in the type if it's a string parameter. So you can actually do something like this if you want to, but in this scenario it's just a method that doesn't take any parameters. Okay, so we're just going to do this, and then we can actually just say returns, then we can say from task dot from, let's just resolve task there, and we can actually just say dot from result, and in there we can return, I can just say new, yeah, list of, you know what, let me remove, let's just close this actual one so we can have more room to play. And let me just show you what is going on here, because it's very, very important. Okay, so these are all just namespaces. I can take this out. This is just going to make our code extremely long. Okay, let's resolve that. So we have the blog resolved, and then we have this one also resolved. So we are saying that it's going to return back so what this is saying is that I'm setting up this method to actually return back this fake object I'm going to put in here. Okay, and I say new blog. We can put quite a few there. We can actually say id is equals to 1, name is equals to me, just gonna use that as an example, and then rating is equals to 4. Is this okay? This is a GUID. We can actually just set up a GUID here. That's another thing. We can actually just say var blog id equals to GUID dot new. Just have to resolve that quickly. Let's resolve the okay. Then we can just say dot new GUID. So that's all we need from this actual stuff. So we're gonna like generate a new GUID, and then we're passing the new GUID into this actual object that we've actually constructed. So as you can see right there, we have this guy going on nicely for us. So we have one blog. What is it complaining about? Okay, I think there's something missing here. We still need another curly bracket, I want to believe. Just make it beautiful, looking a little bit shabby. So okay, so we have something like this. So we are returning a list of blogs. Then we can actually just say you with this 5. Make sure to put a comma there. Then blog ID, we can actually just create a new, just say blog ID 1, and we can say blog ID 2. Okay, this will be blog ID 1, and this will be blog ID 2. The reason why I'm actually like separating it is because we still need to use those GUID to do assertions here. So I'm gonna show you that now. So now we have the components. We've actually arranged for data. Now this is what I'm talking about, where you're now prepping for data. You're prepping for the things that your mocked out services are going to actually return when they are being invoked within your unit. So it's not going to call the real service itself. It's just going to the mock is going to come in and actually just serve it this data. Okay, and if you can remember from our core, from the domain, you can see right there that the actual data we have right here is from infrastructure rather. From infrastructure, if you check in there, you see that we actually have all of this. Remember from this part, we have my first journey history book and all of that. But now in here, we are now saying that when we're just testing for our own data. So this is how you actually like make sure that you're testing your unit in isolation. So we have this underscore blog list view component. We'll pass that in there. And what we now want to do is we want to call the invoke async. Okay, you can see there, and we don't have to do any casting at this point, or we can actually do a casting. Let's do a casting because we can do it to that type. Let me go back to the view component itself. So the view component right there, we want to make sure that we returning back the type, this type. Okay, this is the type we're expecting, this one. Let's copy that and let's stick that here. That's what we're going to convert it to, and let's see if we can resolve that. Okay, that's resolved, right? We've resolved that now. And also make sure that you just have to use async here, because that actual method we're trying to call here is actually an asynchronous method. So it's not something you have to await it. So just make sure that this is why I said you can actually use task, or you can use void based on whatever method you're dealing with, because it's an asynchronous one. So this is how you do it. You convert it to view component result. You see right there. And then the next thing is to actually just let's resolve this, which is going to be view data dot model. So result view data model. And then remember, we're not passing in this is not the type we're expecting from that component. We're not respecting that type. We're expecting this type, which is blog list view component blog list view model. In there, let's just resolve this actual one. We resolve it, and you can see that we actually almost there. Like we have that now. And what now we want to do is we want to allow assert for this, because when we actually get this out, we should have, I want to believe, is this okay, this is actually a type. So let me just go back to this one. This is actually model. Okay, so it's a list, not actually. So just bear in mind you have to pay attention to detail. So this is the type we're expecting, because that's what we're actually passing into this actual view. So whatever you're passing into this view, whatever type it is what you should be casting to. So for this one now, we cast it from this one, which is an object, to this type. Okay, so we have that there. So what we want to do is, the first assertion I would like to do is to actually say is true, and what I want to check is that the model has a count of count is greater than or equals to 2. Let's remove that. Actually, I think actually property within the list. Yeah, so count, we say model dot count is equals to 2, because remember we added just 2. Yeah, and then the next thing we want to do is we want to say that is true again. Is true is model dot is any, model dot any. So inside of the model dot any, I just want to confirm that x dot id is equals to log list 1. Let's resolve that because that is link. So system dot link, we just have to resolve that any to system dot link, and then in here, see, okay, don't think we're passing in the id, are we? Oh, okay, we're not. Okay, this is what we can do. Just for this example, I'm just going to pass in an id so that we can actually just have that check properly. Just gonna say GUID id. Okay, let's just pass that the GUI in so that we can actually have the GUID in, so that we can actually have an id here. Then we can actually just say x.id. So now we passing in the id in the real implementation. Remember, this is the real implementation. I'm just mapping the actual id now so that we can have that as part of our test, so that, because I just want you to see how you can, start prepping and checking for data, or even we can even check for me and you if we want to, if that's what we want to check for. You can whatever you want to check for. So and x.id, oh sorry, let's just do it separately like that, and then any. So those two should be in here. Another thing you can actually assert for is, like I said, me and you don't have to just do just this. Like whatever you need to assert for it. Okay, so that if any data changes or any flow or anything changes, then you can actually be sure that everything you've done is actually properly checked for. Okay, I'm just gonna say var test name 1. Okay, and then var test name 2, which is going to be you. Okay, and then we're gonna use those two right there, 1 then 2. Okay, and then we can actually just make sure that those things are properly tested for. You can see there. So you don't have to, like I said, you don't have to test for every scenario, assert everything. You don't have to assert for everything. You just have to assert for what actually really adds value. So what I'm doing is just showing you how far you can go with this. Okay, so you will see there that I have this actual blog, which actually goes into this actual blog view model, and inside of this blog view model I also have this, as you can see. So what I can also do is I can actually just be sure that these stars are not been fiddled with. So what I can do is I can also test for all of that. And what you just want to do is you might just want to set up a variable for that, to say var, and we can actually just grab one of these guys and say log equals to that, and right there what you just want to do is first. So you want to say first, grab the first one out, and actually you can actually just say that are equal assert. Just want to make sure that your actual what you're expecting is equal to what came. So what I'm expecting for this is actually 4 stars, right? Do we have a 5-star? Actually, let's just go back to this V model. So we have a 5-star, right? So what I can do is, let's go back. What I can do is to say that this is 4-star. I'm expecting a 4-star for this actual get star ratings. Remember the star ratings now. So what I'm saying is that I'm expecting a 4-star for that one, and I'm also expecting a, so let's call this block 1, let's call this block 2, and then we're just gonna change that ID to this ID. Okay, and then yeah, just put an extra star here. So you can check for all of the stars if you want to as well, but I'm just using this as an example where I'm just checking for 4 and 5. You can actually add all the list of blocks everywhere, check for all the stars, and you know that they're actually returning back the right star. So as you can see here, block 1, I'm checking for that. Just make sure that we change that to block 1, and then we change this to block 2. Okay, like that. So these are the assertions that we've actually put in place just to ensure that all that actual component is working as expected. So what we're gonna kind of do now is like, you can just debug this now. Let's just debug this actual one. I see right there the breakpoint is 8. Then let's step through it. F10 is what I'm using to step through it. You can see there's a new grid. There's me, you. This is the mock what we've set up, and then we actually call in that method. So let's go into that method because I want you guys to see what's going on here. If you check what is going on there, you will see that this actual data service now has a mock. You see there is a mock. It's a fake data service. It's not calling any other thing. It's mocked out. Then in there, it's just going to return back some results for us. As you can see right there, we've got blogs, the one we prepped from our test. You see there, me and you. And then inside of there, we actually return that back to the actual test. So the test will grab that model. Once we've cast it now, you can see we've done the casting, normal casting, based on what we want to search here. And you can see right there, it tells you the count is 2, so that is fine. The blog ID should be equals to the first, there must be a blog ID with the first blog ID that we set up, and same for the second one. Test name must be the same. You can see right there, and the stars and everything should be fine. And if you check now, you will see that our actual test is happy. You can see right there. That is actually amazing. And you can see that this is just, it makes life easy for you. And also you can go to bed sleeping peacefully, knowing that if anything changes in your code, you've actually tested it properly. Your code is bulletproof. Everything is properly tested, and you are actually, proud of what you've done. But I'm actually excited with this because now this actually concludes the this actual crash course. I hope you guys learned a ton. I hope I was clear enough. I hope I didn't mumble up a lot of information here and there. And yeah, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, share with your families and friends. Also comment, let's engage. Tell me what you're developing with all of these things I've shown you, because I've shown you everything that you actually really need to, most of the things that you can use to actually develop an application for yourself. So I would actually see you in my next video. Keep well.